Welcome to Chapter 3, where we're going to take a look at some of the key content that helps us begin to study the Second Industrial Revolution, that period of time that starts at about 1870 and runs to about 1900. What we're going to look at here in this particular lesson on Chapter 3 is how the United States becomes an industrial society after the Civil War. Now, you left off right around this time in 8th grade, and we're going to pick up on that here in this course this year, and we want to figure out how it is that our society kind of becomes a modern industrial country. So let's take a look at that. Specifically, there are going to be 4 things that you're going to see in this lesson that are important. And that's going to be access to lots of natural resources. And what you'll see here are these natural resources are necessary to produce a lot of goods. You're going to see things like inventions. And it's the inventions themselves which will allow much new ways to produce. And we're going to see a large workforce, and we're going to talk about the different ways that large workforce comes to America. And we're going to talk about laissez-faire economics, and that's something that I definitely need to make sure you highlight, write down, whatever it is, because we're going to keep coming back to it again and again and again and again. And as we look at all of these different components, the 4 things that we just mentioned on the previous slide, what you need to make sure you understand is that this whole process, what we're calling again, and remember that you're going to call it this, right? The Second Industrial Revolution. This whole process will make our nation the world's leading industrial powerhouse by the 1900s. We are going to become, essentially, the top producing country in the world. No other power, no other nation in the world can produce as much as we can. So the question as we talk about this here is why is that going to be? What is it that's going to allow our nation to produce more goods at lower prices? Because that's exactly what's going to help us become this leading powerhouse, that our nation is going to be able to produce more than any other nation on earth. And we're going to produce it at such a low price that people are going to be able to buy it. The end result of this is going to be our nation having the largest ever and really fastest growing ever gross national product. And you can see that there in the last bullet on this slide. The gross national product is if you took everything that we make, if you took every component of everything that we produce, and you put it all in a giant bucket, right? So here's the giant bucket, right? And we're going to put in all the homes that we build, and all the cars that we build, and all of everything, all of the electricity that we produce. If we take in the value of everything that we have, right, and we put it all inside this bucket, everything has a dollar amount, right? The house is worth so many dollars. The car is worth so many dollars. Electricity is worth so many dollars. And what's in here? The total value, that's what you see right up there. The gross national product, the total value of everything that we have in our country that we produce in 1 year. So now we have to take a look at what it is that's going to let us have this incredible fast-producing economy that leads to the largest gross national product ever. And I told you that one of the key things that helps us industrialize is an incredible amount of natural resources. And that vast amount of natural resources, and if you're looking for a different way of kind of trying to understand what a natural resource is, it's a raw material, it's the stuff that you use to make things. So let's pretend that we have what you see right here, which is essentially a pencil, right? What are the raw materials? What are the raw materials that you would need to make a pencil, right? Well, you would need wood, you would need graphite, that's the black stuff inside your pencil. You would need aluminum to make that little metal thing that goes around the eraser, which of course is made out of rubber. Which means, of course, you need rubber trees and all of those kinds of things. So there's the raw materials that you would need in order to produce that pencil. And we have a tremendous amount of raw materials in America. We're able to get our raw materials cheaply. So if you take a look at this and you kind of see what it is we're talking about, then you'll be able to get a better understanding of what I mean. A great example of us getting these resources cheaply would be oil. Petroleum itself, the idea of an oil boom begins here in Pennsylvania. So that we're able to produce more oil here at home than any place else in the world. And oil is a great example. Think about it, right? Here's a map of the world. Right now, 2000, whatever it is, we get our oil, right, from all over the world. We get it from places like Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Iran, or the Middle East. And that oil has to come up here through the Suez Canal, through the Mediterranean, and all the way over here by ship. Right? And then it has to go, once it's here by ship, then it has to go, right, on rail, and then every single part of that requires you to pay someone. Right? Think about that. You have to pay someone over here to pump the oil. Then you have to pay someone to drive the oil to a port. And then you have to pay someone to take that oil and put it on the ship. And then you have to pay someone to take it on a ship and bring it all the way over here to port. And then you have to pay someone to take it off the ship and put it on the train. And then you have to pay someone to put it on the train and take it to wherever you want to go. And then you have to pay someone to put it on a truck or into the ground or to do whatever it is you want to do with it. That's a lot of money, folks. That's a lot of money. What if we change that system? What if we just got the oil here in Pennsylvania, put it on a rail car? Well, then all of a sudden, yeah, we're paying money to pull it out of the ground here in Pennsylvania, and yeah, we're going to pay some money to put it on the train, and we're going to pay some money to get it off the train, but not nearly as much as we paid in that last scenario. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what it means when we say cheap American natural resources, because we don't have to pay as much for it. When it comes to something like oil, right, we have more oil, we get cheaper transportation, you're going to have more goods moving, that means you're going to have more production. It's a great way for our country to get what it needs to be successful. So again, that first thing that we're going to see that we had talked about that's going to help our country become great and become an industrial nation is a vast amount of natural resources. Okay? The second thing we said that was going to help our country become fantastic were new inventions. And there are lots of folks out there inventing, of course, and I know that you're familiar with the one that I'm going to circle right here, Thomas Edison. I know you've heard of him before, who invents all kinds of things like the record player and batteries and so on. But these inventions change the way we work, and that's what I want you to understand. They change the way we work so that now we're more efficient. That means we work quicker and make more in a shorter amount of time, but we can also work longer hours. Now think about it. Think about what that means, right? Prior to the invention of something like, the light bulb, right? we were limited in our ability to work. We were limited by something pretty simple, right? The sun. Daylight. I don't know, or maybe something like a candle, right? We were limited with the amount of light that we could use. And when you're in a factory, you can't run. You need light, right? You can't run a factory on flipping candles or oil lamps, right? But when you create the light bulb, when you create this idea that we now have something that powers us 24 hours a day, think about how that revolutionizes everything from hospitals, where people are taken care of 24 hours a day, to working, where now our factories are running, folks, 24 hours a day. It's those factories running 24 hours a day that allows us to produce so much that you end up with that really high, remember we talked about by 1900? That really high gross national product, GNP. So, inventions like the light bulb really help us work more efficiently. Inventions like the telephone change the way we communicate. Something like the telephone itself, created by Alexander Graham Bell, that's revolutionary because you can now speak to people completely, clearly, with no confusion whatsoever, and that's really important to understand. If that doesn't sound like that big of a deal to you, imagine what it would like to communicate before the telephone. Now, this is a telegram right here. This is something that you would send before you had telephones, and that was the thing that you used to press Morse code on, right? The little like beep 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 thing. That's this up here that I'm circling. That's a telegraph. And you would use the telegraph, and you would end up getting one of these telegrams. And look, here's one from Henry B. Allen, Franklin Institute, to Dr. Enrico Fermi. And this says, reservations made at Rittenhouse Club, 1811 Walnut Street, for both evenings. Okay, so what time? What time do I need to be there? What about dress? Right? There's a lot of details not inside this telegram. Well, if now all of a sudden we see something like the telephone, which lets us have this access, how much better for everyone when it comes down to business. So, having covered two of the things so far that help us become an industrial nation, now we have a third, right? And that third is a large workforce. So we've had so far natural resources, we've had inventions, and now we have a large workforce. And really what that means is a couple things. Number one, you can see it right here at the top. It means that we have enough people to do the work that our factories demand them of, because now those factories are running 24 hours a day. But for every person that comes to our country, every person in this workforce, that's also a person who's going to buy products, right? There's another way of saying that. High consumer demand. The more people you have, the larger your workforce, the higher the consumer demand will be, because those folks are going to want things. This is just as important as natural resources, because you can have all the cheap natural resources in the world, but if you can't make anything out of them because you don't have enough workers, then what good is it, right? You need the workers to produce the goods. So where do those workers come from? Because our population will triple between 1870 and 1900. That population triples because of two primary things. Number one, large families. Check out this picture right down here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 kids in that family, assuming that that lady right there is mom. 8 kids. That mom has been pregnant for like a decade. 10 years she's been pregnant and nursing kids. Now you've got these large families, right? 8 people. That's awesome. But also at the same time, we have a tremendous number of immigrants that are arriving in our country. 17 million of them coming in a short time span. That's more than the population of Pennsylvania. So it's the equivalent of adding an entire state like Pennsylvania to our country in 40 years. That's a tremendous influx of people. And again, that means now we have the workers we need, an abundant workforce, right? Having these large families and immigrants now means we have an abundant workforce that's also going to buy the products that they make and give us high consumer demand. The last thing we're going to take a look at here, and we'll get into this in much more detail as we go on, is laissez-faire economics. This is the last thing that makes us an industrial powerhouse in the second industrial revolution and gives us that gross national product. People at the time in the second industrial revolution really believed in what we call laissez-faire, that the government should interfere as little as possible with the economy. Now, I want you to think about that, because the government does interfere in the economy now. What do you mean, Mr. D, right? How does the government interfere in the economy? It's actually much easier than you think. Let's take cigarettes, for example. Marlboros. If the government did not interfere as little as possible, if we really had a laissez-faire economy right now in America, you could sell those Marlboros to I don't know, how about a kindergartner, right? Because you want to get them hooked young, right? You could sell those Marlboros using anything you wanted, right? Let's get some sexy men up there to sell those Marlboros to women. Let's get some sexy women up there to sell those Marlboros to men. Let's do whatever it would take to sell those Marlboros. Who cares that it gives you cancer? Big freaking deal. If it's a laissez-faire, the government will interfere as little as possible, right? Now, at the time, people really embraced this. Remember, we're talking about 1870 to 1900, and people didn't really realize just how much a government could do to protect its people. People who like laissez-faire, they want little government regulation, like I just talked about. They want supply and demand to set pay and price. But most important, they believe in a couple things. They believe that competition makes business better, so the more people that compete, the better business will be. And they believe in low taxes. All of these things, when you put them together, all 4 of those things, little government regulation, supply and demand, competition, low tariffs, what you should end up with are people having more money to spend. That's the idea. If you give all of these things, people have more money to spend. Of course, they might spend it on terrible things like, addictive chemicals, but they'll have more money to spend. This idea that you can get in there and do whatever you want to do to make some money, convince people to buy your product, that encourages entrepreneurs. And America still has a tremendous number of entrepreneurs, people that are willing to risk their own money to start a business. And think about now, modern day entrepreneurs, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. These are people who saw a market and they went out and they did what they had to do to get it. And now that they have a product, people are willing to pay and to look at advertisements so that they can participate, right? That's an entrepreneur. So if we're going to summarize so far, if we're going to take a look again at what we've talked about here, those 4 things, right? Remember those 4 things that make our country great. Those 4 things are going to be 1, abundant natural resources. It's going to be 2, right? We have a number of inventions that allow us to produce more and be more efficient. We also have, of course, that large workforce which allows us to not only have those factories running 24 hours a day, but also gives us high consumer demand. And we also have an economic system that embraces laissez-faire ideas that government should get out of the way so that we can be successful. And we'll do more work on this tomorrow in class.